Welcome to 20th Century Geek. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? That's right, we're bringing our Joker trilogy to a close. First, we talked about the 30th anniversary of The Killing Joke, 30 years of that great Alan Moore, Brian Boland book. Then I got in my comic book guys, my comic book specialists, Matt and Jordan, to talk about all things baddie, all things villain, all those naughty, nasty people in Marvel and DC and any of the universes. So now we're bringing it back full circle. We talked about the wider villain community in the comic book world. Now I brought Julian Darius back, and he and we have a discussion about the clown prince of crime himself. Why is the Joker so popular? Why is the Joker the Joker? Who was the best Joker? All these questions and more answered as Julian and I get into it about the Joker. So sit back, relax, grab a drink of Smilex, and I'll see you on the other side. So, we're here to talk about the Joker. And really, I suppose it's a follow-up to our discussion around The Killing Joke. And the Joker in any and all forms, I suppose, is what I really want to say. So, I suppose we just jump straight in, and I'll ask your opinion, Julian. What's your opinion of the Joker as a character?
Well, I think that the Joker is obviously Batman's archenemy, but more than that, I think he's iconic. When you think about great supervillains, the Joker's probably number one. Certainly probably more successful than Lex Luthor. And I can't think of a sort of definitive supervillain who is more iconic than the Joker.
Yeah, he's that perfect combination of character and look, isn't he? I mean, you could easily draw the Joker and it would be identifiable. It's a bit harder to draw Lex Luthor and make him as iconic.
Right, and I think that, in thinking about this in preparation for this podcast, I kept thinking about how successful the Joker's insanity is. How successful that edge is. And you can imagine Lex Luthor scheming. You can imagine, Magneto doing, moving the White House or doing great things. But it's that danger of the Joker, that combines the visual with that kind of unhinged feeling that I think is present in the best Joker stories. Even in like the 60s silly Joker stuff, he's unhinged in a way that like the Riddler isn't.
Mm. Well, I've always thought the Joker's like, if you're in a situation walking home at night in the dark and you see that person and they're sort of talking to themselves under their breath, and there's always that undercurrent of menace if you just don't know what's going to happen next. They could just be a completely docile person, a bit drunk, whatever, or they could be crazy and dangerous. And I think that's why the people are legit, even as a character, people are legit scared of the Joker.
Yeah, I agree. I like that analogy. That sense of danger and that sense of not knowing what he's going to do. And I think there's a kind of tension in Joker stories between the Joker as a kind of schemer and the Joker as an anarchist. The Joker is somebody who hatches these elaborate plots like the laughing fish and all this sort of thing. But behind it is somebody who's unhinged and really could go either direction, or, I can't think of another supervillain who's more likely to sort of throw away his entire scheme and go in another direction, or just shoot somebody unexpectedly or something. And I think that gets at that sense of menace that you're describing on the streets.
Well, it always feels like his schemes are almost secondary. Like, they are what he's doing, but he's doing it to either make a point or just to annoy Batman. Just like you say, if it doesn't work, he's happy to almost cast it aside and try something different, and just like you say, on a dime he can change and be something different.
Yeah, and that gets it also. I mean, I get a sense that the Joker's having a bit of fun in a way that other characters aren't, and even in the darkest Joker stories, maybe Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke, um, the Joker has a sense of fun, and I mean, he's certainly one of the darkest Batman villains. Right up there with Two Face in terms of just how how dark he is. Although I think Cesar Romero did a fine job in the '66 show, and I can dig a silly Joker story, but he does seem to be having a sense of fun. I mean,
Mm.
even like Jack Nicholson, who was more of the sort of gangster Joker, um, he's having fun. Maybe it's just the laugh, and that gets into kind of the man who laughs, and there's been a lot of study of like laughter theory, and laughing is such an odd thing that human mammals do, right?
Mm.
um, Other animals don't laugh, and if they show their teeth to each other, it's a menacing thing. um, and so often what we laugh at are really horrible things that we laugh to let go of anxiety because a comedian is talking about sex and we're uncomfortable, or something like that. And I wonder what the role is of that laughter.
Well, it's a tension breaker as well that I think the Joker provides. In they say like horror and comedy are actually so very closely interwoven. Because of the timing being a thing. And in horror, they build a tension. They'll crank it up, and then you either get a genuine scare or you get a false scare. And at the end of both, you'll laugh. You set release of tension that you'll laugh at yourself or the situation. And Joker again combines that. He'll crank up the tension, he'll make you scared, and then he'll pull the punchline. And it could easily be anything from a feather duster to the face, or you find out that he's done something horrific. And it's that thing again, the false scare versus the real scare. And like you said, it could either be either or, but he's terrifying doing both.
Oh, I agree completely. And I'm thinking of that the scene in the first Burton film where he gives Batman a hand and it falls off, and it serves no purpose, right? I mean, for the
Mm.
plot, except to indicate another level of the Joker being crazy. And I quite like that idea of, sort of, it could be a silly gag, or it could be, he's captured Alfred and cut off his hand.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
And I think that's why you know more recently I've been thinking about sort of Grant Morrison's run on Batman, and the fact that he tried to incorporate every iteration of the Dark Knight. Everything from the urban vigilante, the crazy Silver Age, to the sort of brooding '80s version into the '90s. I think the same can be done for the Joker, though. Like you say, he could wake up every morning being something different. And all of them are valid. They're all the same person.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Grant's Batman run, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that idea of the Joker as sort of the ultimate postmodern person who sees identity as fluid.
Mm.
Um, and I kind of regret that. I feel as if that idea that Grant teased out has kind of been dropped, and I enjoy Snyder's Joker, but I feel as if it's sort of positioned as the newest incarnation, um, but I do kind of regret that more all-incorporative technique that you're describing.
Yeah, and within Grant's run, I even think it's mentioned that they describe him as a hollow person. That there is no actual Joker. There is no actual person. So he has to fill that gap, and he can fill it in any way that he wants. For whatever sort of suits that day, that purpose, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that there's something very scary about that, but there's also something very liberating about that. This idea of identity being fluid, and we have this idea about ourselves that we are supposed to have stable identities, and maybe they change slightly over time as we realize things or grow up. But I think the Joker gets at the idea that our identities are often in conflict. If we are, you know, we are, especially in America. I mean, we come from different countries. We come from different cultures. Those are things that clash with our identity as an American and overlap comfortably in some ways, but clash in others. I've known gay Catholics who said, I don't know how to resolve being gay with being Catholic, but I am both, and I can't deny either. And there's something about that fluidity of identity, that ability to entertain contradictions that certainly your idea gets at.
Yeah, I think it's almost like he's fully accepted who he is. To the extent where he's like, well, whatever I am, and I'm just going to go with it and enjoy the flow and the moment, and see where it takes him, sort of thing.
Well, that gets at that fun of the Joker. But another thing that gets at, that I find kind of unresolved about the Joker is, because I deal with depression. I'm a little sensitive to depictions of mental illness as like a fun thing, right? And we were talking about The Killing Joke, and how there is that you were focusing on the human moment between Batman and the Joker, sort of buddies at work, sort of having a laugh over something that was terrible and hard. And I love that, but I also worry about like the way in which that insanity of the Joker becomes commodified for a story idea. And I wonder whether the Joker inside is really having a laugh, or inside is really terrible and torn up.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Like, does it trivialize, like you say, his illness or whatever it is that drives him, to make him that character, whether it be a horror or like you say, a joke? I suppose it has to be a careful balance, really.
Well, and if you think about the people who in real life who the Joker might be more like, I mean, we were talking before the show about like school shootings, and I'm watching the American Crime Story with the assassination of Gianni Versace, and a lot of it focuses on Andrew Cunanan, who is killing people, but clearly torn up inside, clearly self-hating, aware that he's strange. And I think that usually people who go on, maybe this isn't true, but I mean, usually people who go on murderous rampages aren't really, in love with himself. And yet the Joker is, having a laugh and seems to be having fun in many of the stories.
So, I mean, it's almost that, the cliche of laughing on the outside, crying on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Jack Nicholson's version actually makes a joke about that. But you're right. There's got to be some element of truth to that. That is, he is broken as a character. So, is he ever looking to try and are his actions looking to fix that? Is what I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are those moments like your reading of The Killing Joke. I mean, there are some moments of sobriety between the Joker and Batman, like in Dark Knight Returns. But yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like a lot of Joker stories I mean, we're kind of privileging the dark stuff
Mm.
that probably we both like more, but I sort of feel like the Joker's response to tragedy, Batman's response to tragedy is, okay, I'm going to build from this. I'm going to make myself a better person. I'm going to fix this crime that destroyed me and broke my heart. It seems to me that, of course, the Joker's origin varies depending on what you're reading, but it seems to me that, the Joker embodies a kind of response to tragedy that says, okay, so this is a cynical, terrible world. The world is a charnel house in which nobody gets out alive. Um, I'm going to have fun with it.
Yeah.
Why should I care if I kill another person? Why should I sit around and think about their families and all of this? We're all going to die anyway. Who cares? And I'm going to have a sort of bit of fun. And I think that that's terrible and that's horrifying. But like a lot of monsters in literature, there's a part of us that identifies with them, even if we want to read that story and then put them back in the box. I mean, it's the Jekyll and Hyde thing of this gets at something in us that maybe we don't want to fully explore, but we want to kind of go there in this kind of protected safety zone of being able to say, well, of course, I'd never do that, but it's hard not to, certainly with Nicholson or Ledger, it's hard not to enjoy those performances and quite like the Joker in a way.
Yeah, well, on film so far, he's almost been portrayed like in a rock star kind of way, hasn't he? He's always been bad, but like you say, Nicholson, Ledger, even Jared Leto's performance is very much that he's a rock star character, and you can't help but think, yeah, that performance is pretty cool, and I want to see more of that, and that sort of thing. But you're right, you wouldn't want to spend any time with the actual character.
Right. You don't want to be in a room with the Joker. The novelty would wear off in 2 seconds.
That's it. Whether it wore off for me or him sooner, that'd be the worry, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it would not be an agreeable encounter. And yet, with this sort of protective veil of fiction, we're able to sort of delight in this character, and delight in what he's doing in a way that what he's doing is horrible, and he can't, again. I mean, I think he can't be happy, right?
And that's, well, I think the weird thing is, I say, they've recently done, Tom King recently did a story in which it was called the War of Jokes and Riddles, and it was about Joker, couldn't find something to laugh about anymore. And in that sort of story, he's just not as good. It took out a key element of who the character is, and all of a sudden he just felt more generic. And so you say, him admitting almost to that brokenness was, did take something away from the character. So it's almost like, in a meta way, he knows he's got to have that Joker element, really, to be who he is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I haven't read that story. I'm always behind on my comics, but I quite like that. I mean, I can't imagine, the worst Joker stories are the Joker stories where you think, oh, I could substitute another character in there. And that's not true of, I mean, I guess that's true of most characters, but certainly there are a lot of Penguin stories in which you could, replace another mobster. I mean, Two-Face flips a coin, and that's kind of, his Dick Tracy thing. And, you could substitute somebody else in for some of them. Joker stories feel unique. They don't feel like, and part of it is that laughter. Part of it is that joie de vivre that he seems to have. And I think, you mentioned at the beginning, like the visuals, right? I mean, the dress is so important. And I was thinking about that and thinking about Arkham Asylum and how much I like these sort of, you know, transvestite or transgender version of the Joker. Um, that sort of plays with that idea of, like, I love purple. I'm going to, be flamboyant and wear typically like a suit or something, but be crazy and out there. There's an element of presentation, even self-conscious presentation, that I guess is there with other villains too. I mean, you don't wear, a spandex green suit covered with question marks without, being aware that you're out as flamboyant or something. But uh, but the Joker seems to be aware that he's doing it. I mean, the Riddler isn't aware that he looks ridiculous usually. The Joker knows it and is having fun with it.
There's almost things that since Arkham Asylum, they've, as you say, they've sort of dabbled with it, but no one's ever taken it to that real level. I think there's a worry that if they were to take it to almost that drag queen level of flamboyance and craziness, that he would he couldn't be taken seriously or he'd look too silly.
Mm-hmm.
But this being the Joker, as you say, like, why wouldn't he do that? There probably would be times when he would go all out and he would go full RuPaul and that, and he would still be amazing and horrific and terrifying. And I'd love to see someone take it to that full, up to 11.
The full RuPaul.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I often think of that, how that element has been. I mean, if it was controversial at DC editorial when it was in Arkham Asylum, and I think that there's an awareness of presentation that, I remember it wasn't all that much after Arkham Asylum where the movie Basic Instinct came out, and there was a lot of controversy over. Like on the one hand, it was good that there was a bisexual character as one of the main characters, but on the other hand, she was a murderer, and I think that while I would delight at the full RuPaul Joker, you know, is that a homophobic presentation of, like, I mean, it's so hard to write that and not have it seem to imply, like, being gay or flamboyant is connected to homicidal activities, which obviously isn't true, but is a kind of stereotype.
Yeah,
So,
I refer to those
speaking
kinds of things as the Wortham interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
It's and that would be the real fine line. That, like I say, a good writer and artist could probably pull it off, but there would always be those people that would read it in that way and try and take that, like you say, up in an article or in the mainstream, which is a shame, really, because it could just be a thing, like you just decided, today I'm going to wear, and this is my scheme or whatever. But it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I would definitely, I definitely would like it, and I want, more in that direction, and I think it's there. It's there, even in Nicholson, right? I mean, Nicholson is so obviously not, a queer actor, but his, the sort of I love purple element of it, the kind of, even the Prince music comes in, and there's an element of that. And I think it could be tied to that sense of self-presentation, that sense of fun that the Joker has. But, there was a time in which the idea that the Joker would kiss Batman was just unbelievably controversial. And, obviously, like, the homoerotic elements of Dark Knight Returns between the Joker and Batman have kind of locked in this spiral that has a homosocial, if not homoerotic context to it, was really controversial.
And that's that relationship that gets played round and round again and again is really interesting, because, again, in the Scott Snyder run, in both Death of the Family and Endgame, that relationship almost symbiotic. You know, they're almost dependent on each other. Is really played out, and I did love that stuff. But Death of the Family in particular, the idea that the Joker is, you know, he's telling to Batman, my job as your villain is to make you better. And all these people you've got hanging around are just, you know, just distractions from you being the best you can be. I'm the one that loves you and wants to make you better. I'm the perfect partner. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I quite love that, and I'm a big fan of Death of the Family. You know, less so Endgame, but you know, boy, that element certainly comes through, and you know, I mean, it gets at what is the version of not just the Joker, but of Batman that we like. I mean, do we want Batman to have a franchise? You know, Batman Inc. Do we want Batman to have, you know, Nightwing and Batman and Robin and Catwoman and all of this sort of hangers on, or is Batman this lone, dark, obsessed individual? And I kind of feel like the Joker works best in those solo Batman stories. You know, there's something about, like, you know, having Robin, I mean, deal with a completely homicidal maniac that just accentuates how strange it is that Batman would bring a 13-year-old boy into his adventures, you know?
Yeah. I know what you mean. I'm almost curious as to why they haven't had a story that's gone the other way. And they're sort of, if you've got the Bat family, why hasn't the Joker ever created, like, the Joker family? Or he might have done. I may not know the story.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I guess Harley Quinn kind of qualified, right? I mean, she's, you know, the Joker's equivalent, and obviously it's become a very popular character in her own right.
Yeah, a great offshoot. And I think you say that's the thing. He created, well, the character was created for him, and she's spun off, much I suppose like Nightwing and some of the others. But to take this further then, so what's your thoughts on how has Joker, over the time, influenced other pop culture characters, do you think?
Well, I think that, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I just think that because the Joker seems so so much like the quintessential arch villain. I mean, I think he has that sense of danger. He has that sense of flamboyance, and I think that it's hard if somebody is coming up with a sort of arch enemy. You know that any, you know, arch enemy is going to be compared to the Joker, right? You know, and so the Joker kind of forces other people to up their game in terms of creating a kind of iconic character. I think also, you know, I mean, the Joker was always violent. You know, I mean, going back to the original stories, I mean, he killed lots of people. Obviously, a lot of Batman's early foes were more murderous than even Batman was. But you know, I mean, the Joker's violence, you know, I mean, maybe one of the negative consequences of that is, you know, the expectation that a villain has to have a big death toll. Whereas I think that might be a misunderstanding, you know, maybe parallel to the kind of classic, you know, sort of 90s misinterpretation of revisionism is just, you know, super dark superhero stories. You know, that what strikes me about Joker stories isn't necessarily that they're so terrible and ghastly, but it's that psychological warfare with that protagonist.
But I think that's a good thing about it. That's the thing about the Joker, because he's not, like you say, super strong and not super powered even, really. He is psychological. You know, he's not super, is he? He's a thriller. He's a horror, and I think that's why one of the reasons I'm attracted to him as a character, as a villain.
So, what do you think his influence has been?
I think about characters I've seen, and obviously because he was influenced as a design from different pieces, but I think in the 90s you get characters like The Mask
Hmm. Yeah.
that is that idea of the Joker taken to 11. You know, that sort of, you get the mild mannered character Stanley Ipkiss, more the
Hmm.
comic than the film, to be fair. But you take, you know, and then he puts on the mask to hide his identity, and he can become this terrorizing cartoon villain, vigilante, anti-hero. I'm not sure really. It's that I think the Joker sort of almost acts as the barometer for what's acceptable to do in comics as a villain.
Hmm.
Um, so if just what I thought was, if you know, he killed Robin, and then you get things like Dark Knight Returns and the Killing Joke, and he acts as that barometer of the ability to for what the villain can do. So in the 90s, it's almost more acceptable for villains to start killing and doing greater acts of violence because they sort of act in his shadow.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's very well put. I mean, the mask is inarguable in that respect. Yeah, I mean, I think of the haunting death of Jason Todd and how Batman hears those blows, and how resonant that is. And I think you're right. I mean, the Joker, sets the stage for how far can we push these things. And I think that's certainly true in cinema. Um, Obviously, like, Marvel has a problem with its villains, and traditionally, like, the villains are not as interesting as the superheroes and their kind of plot devices in
Mm.
these stories. Um, and yet, less so in Suicide Squad, but certainly in the first Burton film and in Dark Knight, the Joker steals the show
Mm.
in both of them. I mean, he's far more, maybe a little less in Dark Knight, but I mean, he's far more interesting than the main character. And when he's on screen, you can't look away.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the thing when casting the Joker. Um, he's got to have a charisma. You know, he is the baddie and he is horrific and terrifying, but he's almost hypnotic. You know, you should not be able to take your eyes off him when he's on the screen.
Yeah, and I also like the way in which in the '89 movie, when he throws that parade, there's a way in which he is kind of an embodiment of the city gone wrong.
Yeah.
Sort of, we can't count on these mayors. I'm gonna give you a real parade and throw fake money at you. And I think that's true in Dark Knight as well. That um, he's kind of you know the embodiment of a city gone completely corrupt and crazy. And instead, you can go the gangster route and try to accumulate money, but you can also just say, this is all mad. This whole world is mad. The city's gone crazy, and I am the embodiment of its madness.
Mm. Yeah, he is almost like the worst case scenario of like wish fulfillment, that venting of frustration and craziness. Personified, and possibly that's where they went wrong with Jared Leto. Really, in his Joker, that he has no focus. Yes, he comes across as slightly menacing, but he doesn't have a purpose like the others did.
Hmm. Yeah, he doesn't seem wedded into a context outside of um, just that kind of rock star persona,
Mm.
which I guess fits that movie. But that movie isn't wedded to Gotham in the same way. And I think, like, we were talking last time about, like, Rambo, and um, it occurs to me that some of these violent Joker stories are also a kind of response to crime, a kind of response to that sense of, like, gangs out of control, and um, you know we still talk about this, and if you picture kind of gangs out of control and how violent and mad they are, and you see them as fundamentally irrational players, the Joker kind of embodies that sort of that sense of urban decay, whether that's really just perception or reality.
So really, so the Joker then can really represent the era, in which he's being used. So I suppose the Jack Nicholson Joker was that 80s yuppie-ish gangster, almost, almost sort of like the American Psycho, ironically, turned into the Joker.
Yeah, I dig that. I dig that a lot. And that also gets at the kind of alter ego for Bruce Wayne, right? Bruce Wayne as, the rich kid, and American Psycho was a big influence on the Nolan films, because Christian Bale had played that. So yeah, I see that. I mean, I'm curious about what you think of, sort of like 60s Joker, the sort of funny Joker, both in the comics and in the TV show.
It's interesting. I watched recently. I've been watching some of the '66 Batman, and especially the Joker episodes. And I do find him, of all the villains, again, he's almost like the more focused. Yes, they've all got a gimmick, but with the Joker, it's about the gag. And Cesar Romero's performances are wonderful.
Oh yeah.
He's silly and daft, and it's ultra brightly coloured, but he is undoubtedly the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you. What's your opinion of that sort of era of Joker then?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I certainly prefer the sort of Heath Ledger Joker. I mean, I certainly grew up on the '80s incarnation of the Joker, but I would watch the Batman '66 show a lot, and I felt very much the same way. I mean, I felt like Cesar Romero kind of steals the show, and he has a sense of confidence in his delivery of the joke or the gag that Gorshin as the Riddler, doesn't seem to have quite as much. I mean, you get the sense that the Joker is really having fun. Yeah, I mean, I think that even in some of the comics of the period, I mean, I chafe a little at how he doesn't have that sense of menace that I associate with the Joker, and that you associate with the Joker. But he still, those are still more entertaining stories to me than a Riddler story or somebody a bit more sillier.
Yeah, and I think the thing that seems to bridge the gap for me is Batman the Animated Series, and Mark Hamill's Joker can be both, even in
Absolutely.
a single episode. Some of the great ones I think of are they do the Joker fish, but there's Christmas with the Joker, which starts with him escaping prison or Arkham Asylum, whatever it is, on a rocket-powered Christmas tree. But then he kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and the Gordon family to do a Christmas special live on TV, which is going to end with them all being executed.
Yeah.
And it's a mishmash of that 66 silliness, but undercut with that sort of 80s and early 90s violence and menace. I mean, granted that the violence was very rarely depicted in the show, but it is that mishmash, and it goes to show the versatility of how he can be both.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking of the animated series too, and I think you're completely right about sort of placing it tonally, and that gets at exactly what you're saying of like, the Joker's got a squirting flower, and he can squirt your face, and it might be acid, or it might just be water because he felt like it that day. You know, you have no idea. I mean, and I was thinking also of Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb's Joker from like Long Halloween, and he that seems to be maybe a little darker than the animated series, but there is that same sense of fun. Like I mean, I think the Joker's riding a rocket at one point in that as well, and Tim Sale depicts him as almost inhuman. He's got exaggerated features, and he has. There's a little bit of that kind of combination of just outlandish silliness from the '66 show and a sense that, yeah, at the same time, that's occurring in a universe in which death can happen. And, he's not a nice guy.
No, and that's it. I think that's the big thing of all this is the fact that he isn't a good guy. No, he's not just a clown. He when played his best, he is, funny, but you're terrified of him. I'm almost. The more we've talked about it, it's just jumped into my head. I don't know if you've seen the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh yeah, sure.
And there's a line in that where Eddie Valiant and Roger Rabbit are handcuffed together, and then eventually Roger slips his hand out of the handcuff to do something, and he asks him and says, "So you could have done that the whole time?" And he says, "No, only when it's funny."
Yes.
And I feel that's the sort of ethos of the Joker. It's like, I can do this whenever I want, but it's only good when it's funny.
Yeah, I love that you went to that moment. And and as soon as you said Roger Rabbit, I thought of that same kind of combination of silly antics and violence that is so present in that movie. That's kind of, half a sort of love letter to Looney Tunes and half, sort of film noir, where people are being boiled in acid, and it's really quite dark. But there is that kind of zany, especially with the villains in there, that kind of zany delight in a goofy sort of murderous evil. But yeah, I mean, I do get that sense too with the Joker that, he might shoot you, but he's going to wait until it's a good punchline.
Yeah. Someone's got to be there to see the joke, so you're probably alright if it's just the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much fun just having a character who has murderous flair. One of the things I think about most in that I come back to about the Nicholson performance is, when he's talking to Kim Basinger in the museum and to Vicky Vale, and he says, you like my work, I'm the world's first fully functioning homicidal artist.
Yeah.
And I think, that idea is, while terrible in real life, gets at the core of the Joker character, gets at something that I love, and also that sense that we are entertained by violence and terror when it's removed from our own actual experience.
Yeah, I like that saying, because he's removed, we can laugh at it. And I do think Nicholson in particular provides that sort of, he's got that creative flair, because they say he does wear the dandy suit and the hat, and he's sort of, he names himself, which I think is fantastic. That I don't think some of the other versions do have. Like I say, I love Heath Ledger's anarchic, like I say, almost punk rock Joker.
Yeah.
But like I say, he's not quite as dandyish, and that always, I know he's very, very popular, and it's a great performance, but because he's a bit dirtier and stuff, I just it was never quite fully Joker for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I do have that sense too. That I love that performance and I love that film, but yeah, it seems like in the Venn diagram, it overlaps the Joker a lot, but it doesn't seem the definitive Joker. It does lack that kind of that dandy quality, that style, the artist.
Mm.
Um, and I was thinking of how, like, a show like Dexter is really popular, and we watch serial killer movies, and or Hannibal and things like this. And one of the things that we like is that these serial killers are murdering people in these unbelievably flamboyant ways, right? I mean, they're
Mm.
making sculptures out of bodies, and it's terrible. And I mean, if that's real life, it's horrifying. But that sense of art, that sense of flair, that sense of joy in what he's doing, even though what he's doing is killing people and poisoning all the fish, or kidnapping Alfred, or whatever it is. And that combination, I think, is just intoxicating from a fictional standpoint.
Mm. The question I'd have is though, does he only work against Batman? And he will always be a Batman villain, but if you were to put him in a different comic series like The Flash, Green Arrow, I don't know, Superman, does he work against those other superheroes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I quite like, during the post-crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, sort of John Byrne era of Superman, the Joker would show up like once a year, and Byrne would do a like Joker issue, once a year, and I quite liked those issues. I mean, they worked okay, but Joker was always a fish out of water in Metropolis. I mean, Metropolis is clean.
Mm.
The Joker, it's not his milieu. Um, there's something about that dapper Joker in the grubby landscape that really works. And seeing him in that bright Metropolis, you know, you can do it for a story, but I don't know that it would work with him as a major villain. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on your version of the Joker and your version of those characters. Like, I mean, I would say like with Flash, I mean, my Flash has always been a little bit lighter than other characters. I mean,
Mm.
he had goofier villains, um, and those worked for me. I mean, you had writers who did that really well, and um, but of course, like once like Jeff Johns took over Flash, you have like Iron Heights, which is kind of like a version of Arkham Asylum, and all the villains became a lot darker and a lot more murderous.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could see the Joker in that context, but it's not my traditional context for the Flash. I mean, I think if the Joker arrives in your average, the Joker shows up in like your average Marvel movie, like there's Tony Stark playing around, and all of a sudden there's a guy who walks in and just murders people,
Mm.
and you just think, oh my God, what am I watching? This is not right. This is not the same movie. Um, so what do you think? Do you think he's that versatile, or he depends on Batman?
Uh, I don't know, and that's the thing, because weirdly you sort of focused on the Flash, and for me, he's the character I would like to see go up against the Joker, um, because of that lightheartedness of the character and stuff. And I know, um, they do take him down some tough routes and stuff, but
Hmm.
I don't know don't know enough about the Flash to say that he's ever faced anybody that's, like you say, that is Joker level, um, could do the Joker level damage. And I'll just be interested to see if, without calling in Batman, like, just because it could just be that one day the Joker wakes up and thinks, yeah, for a difference, you know, I'm gonna go and try and gas Central City or whatever. I
Hmm.
just think it would be interesting to try and take that different tone.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that too. I was thinking of those, how a character like the Flash, and I do remember a few stories where like the Joker showed up in Flash or something, but I don't really remember them very well. Um, but I was thinking how, that more lighthearted character might be broken by a kind of
Mm.
encounter with the Joker. And that got me thinking about, both like Robinson's Golden Age and Watchmen has some of this, like, when Rorschach encounters that child killer
Mm.
and has his psychological break from like just a guy who's dressing up and likes fighting crime, but it's Batman 66. I mean, it's this is something fun, um, and becomes Rorschach as we think of him. It's in response to that horror,
Yeah.
and it seems to me, like my version of the Joker is somebody who just encountering him is an embodiment of that horror, is an embodiment of you know the horror of the universe, um, that way in which um, life is absurd and violent and unfathomable. And I was thinking that an encounter with the Joker would be like, a running experience with the child killer for Rorschach. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want like Barry Allen to become become Batman, right? Um, but I mean, you know, I think the best Joker stories are stories in which, for me anyway, just encountering him leaves you scarred.
Mm.
Um, you're not going to walk away. I mean, even being a policeman, encountering the Joker is a whole other thing. Um, it's something you tell your kids about. Um, it is that kind of psychological encounter that changes a person.
It's true.
And that's
You just say that, but it's a story that you tell kids. I mean, really, I think like more than any of the other villains, Joker is like the bogeyman. Like he's the one
yeah,
that you'd be like, well, if you're not good, the Joker will come and get you. He would. I could imagine him being used as a sort of a threat or a punishment.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and you were talking, last episode about the Flash and how like you wonder who's still living in this city after
Yeah,
3 or 4 seasons, Um, well, I mean, who's still living in Gotham City? But if you are, go to bed early or the Joker will get you.
mm,
So, I mean, you're so used to dealing with crime and violence on a daily level, but it's the Joker that you're really scared of. And there have been like I'm a fan of the crossover Underworld Unleashed, where you've got all these assembled supervillains, and a lot of them are sort of like goofy. It's like Moth,
mm.
the Moth, and stuff like that, and the Joker walks in, and you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah,
Just like he's the one everyone else is terrified of.
yeah. He's the person you'd hope doesn't turn up to the party.
Yes, yeah, you can imagine like the supervillain party. You know, everybody's having a good time and drinking and reminiscing about that time you had the Robin tied up and Batman beat you, and it's all well and good, and you're robbing banks and the Joker shows up and you're terrified. I mean, the atmosphere completely changes. And again, you don't know if the Joker's going to have a drink and tell a wonderful story or going to murder you.
Yeah, I I always wonder like there are there must be people. I mean, not to that level, obviously, but there must be people that have that sort of like they say, that psychopaths make great CEOs and they become very powerful. There must be that when they come into the room of they're either going to be incredibly charismatic and welcoming and generous, or they're going to try and break you just for their own amusement because they can. So I can see that sort of again that real world tension of just being like what's he bringing to the what party favors is he bringing this time?
Yeah, and I mean, it reminds me of some of the stories about Trump of sort of people have encountered him and said, I think like Chris Overman, who is super liberal, used to live in a Trump building, and said, he's the most charming person I've ever met. He'll meet me in the hall and say, how's the building treating you? And, seems so interested in the experience that I'm having. And then there are these other reports of him turning on a dime and just telling somebody they're stupid and it's all their fault, and um, and being suddenly very scared of, did I not praise this person the right way in this meeting? What caused the shift?
Yeah, and that dynamic. I mean, you mentioned Harley Quinn earlier on. Um, you know, in that relationship, when it's shown again at its best, is the fact that he broke her and psychologically captured her and enticed her to him, and then he's almost bored of her. So well, I've done that now, and you're here as my lackey, but I'm almost. They do it in Mad Love.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing of sort of like you say, on a dime. It's just like, I'm bored of you now.
Yeah.
There's got to be something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, I'd like to see that dynamic explored more. I mean, that sense of turning on a dime that we were talking about like, he could, give you a feather duster or kill you in relationships. And isn't that one of our fears, that, anybody in our life could just say at any point, yeah, I'm done with you. And not require an explanation. I mean, we'd like to think that that wouldn't happen. Somebody loves us and we have friends and all of this, but yeah, I'd like to see that dynamic explored more.
Because like you say about relationship, that happens, doesn't it? Like you see relationships that happen where one party, showers the other party with love and affection, and they make them feel wanted and secure and happy, but systematically they're sort of driving away that other party's friends.
Yeah.
And then when they are isolated, they're actually trapped, and they're either treated horrendously or they are just dropped. Because the fun's now over. Some sort of like narcissist or sociopath that just takes some sort of pleasure from doing that. I don't think their relationship has been explored sufficiently, really, in psychological terms.
I agree with that. And I mean, what you're saying, my mind is reeling in horror because I'm thinking of the descriptions of abusive relationships that I've read, in which by the time somebody realizes that they're really abusive, the friends have been driven off, the dependencies have been created, um, the world views of, who both of them have been constructed to a point that you can't leave. Um, it's not that simple. So I'm kind of reeling in horror at, like, again, this is sort of a moment where the Joker in real life would be sort of horrifying if you really think of any of this in real life, and yet it's so charming and entertaining. I mean, I find myself quite charmed by the dapper villain, by the villain with panache and presence. I always, it's that kind of combination, like in the Hannibal movies or books, of somebody listening to classical music while they're eating somebody's liver. That bizarre juxtaposition of somebody enjoying themselves and having a sense of style while they're doing something terrible. And I don't know quite why that compels me, or why that juxtaposition works so well. But it seems to, and it seems as if the Joker has that. And I don't know that like Magneto, well, is Magneto dapper? I mean, is Magneto? People are scared of him. I mean, he's powerful, but he has no sense of presence. There's no sense of style. My God, he's wearing a terrible helmet.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there are many other villains that have that, like you say, panache. And to use Hannibal, especially in the TV show, as an example. That idea, the the level of almost like depravity, the horrific nature of killing somebody or cutting off a limb to then eat it is one thing. But then to do it and then to sort of, tenderize it and, put your herbs and your salt in it and flambe it and take to the essence where you've actually turned it into a delicacy. But it's the effort, they've taken they've not just butchered that person, they've actually almost elevated that person into a fantastic dish. It's I'm not sure, like I say, if anyone could ever exist in real life that, but to take it to that level is horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that gets into like the Joker's elaborate schemes. The sense that he's both mad and has these elaborate plots that, that's true in Dark Knight, the film, but it's also true in Death of the Family. That we enjoy these elaborate plots, but they're always balanced by that madness, that insanity.
Well, it's like the end goal, isn't it? They say, does the end justify the means? And sometimes you've got to question the end of what the Joker wants, because that's where the madness lies. When you look at the intricacy of his plans, you can't help but be impressed. But the objective of those plans is where the lunacy lies, because it never completely makes sense of what he actually wants to achieve.
Right. I mean, I think there's a kind of like writerly sleight of hand there, right? That, you can do that elaborate plot and thrill to that elaborate plot, but it doesn't quite make sense. And maybe you can just say, oh, well, he's insane, so it doesn't have to make sense. But, then you get into the whole mental illness thing. But I do like what you're saying about the sort of, the zeal, the effort, and also that sense of panache that one is putting into these terrible plans that, nobody as a villain really compares with.
No, I mean, just to go back to Mad Love though, because that panache is actually like the punchline. I know, Harley Quinn takes one of the Joker's pretty much more basic setups, manages to capture Batman, is about to lower him in to be killed, and then calls in the Joker to say, look, I've done it, and I've done it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you say, you have that moment where he comes in and he sort of looks at her appreciatively, and then just turns. And in the cartoon, he literally beats her across the face, and he's like, what are you doing? Gets Batman out and apologises to him. He's like, this isn't flashy, this isn't funny, there's nothing good here, I'm so sorry, she doesn't know what she's doing. Move on, and next time it'll be more entertaining, I promise. And it's that panache. Like, he won't do it just for doing it. It has to be, bombastic or interesting or funny.
Right, but that's the Roger Rabbit thing of it wouldn't have been funny. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that that's so much of what I like about the Joker, and why he stays with me.
So if there was to be one version of the Joker, whether it be screen or comic page, which is the one that always does stand out for you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that there's a single one. I definitely come back to Arkham Asylum a lot. I do find myself very influenced by Nicholson's and Ledger's performance. Although I agree with you about Ledger. What about you?
I think I'm.
Is it Mad Love? Or?
Yeah, Mad Love came out. I'm of an age where like the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm universes were very influential to me. So Mark Hamill's Joker is my Joker. Whenever I read a Joker story, it's the Mark Hamill voice that I hear. For good or bad, I don't know. But yeah, he's my Joker. I'd have to say the Batman animated series Joker.
I have to say, I think that is becoming, you're winning over time. That um, I see so many people online say, Mark Hamill's Joker is my Joker, and he's portrayed the Joker, including in those animated movies, for longer than anyone else, and I think that it is quite a definitive performance.
Yeah, I think he's definitely got the longevity because he did the computer game. I haven't really played the computer games, but he's done all the games and the animated films. I think the reason for me that it's achieved what it has though is because the writing in that TV show, as well as his performance, was so good that they did get that mix of silliness, madness, and menace. But the recipe, if you were, is just right in so many of those episodes that version of the Joker could be any one of those things, and and all of them in one go.
Well, I wanted to return to what you were saying about like what does the Joker want, that you get at so clearly in that Mad Love example, and it seems that is so different from other villains that it seems the Joker doesn't want to win. He's like the seductor who enjoys the chase more than the victory, right? And that is apropos of Mad Love. I mean, the Joker doesn't want to take over Gotham.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to rule Gotham's criminal underworld in the same way. He likes the fun of sparring with Batman.
Yeah.
He's in it for the chase, and maybe someday he'll win, but that victory is less important than, the death trap that's used, or the plan that finally wins it. It's almost as if winning would be secondary to the elaborate plan that's beautiful in and of itself.
No, I agree. I think it's I can almost imagine him sort of saying it's not about the winning or the losing, it's how you play the game. It is the game that he enjoys rather than the end result. That's, like I say, that's a byproduct, and if he gets away with it, fantastic. If not, well, he's been a thorn in Batman's side and it's been a laugh, so I'll see you next time.
Yeah, I quite like that, and it seems to me that is a particular way of responding to superhero stories. That superhero stories. I mean, if you run them forward, right? I mean, eventually, Batman. You get to like Kingdom Come or something where Batman solved the crime problem. With a kind of authoritarian response. You run them forward enough, and the story's got to fundamentally change. I mean, Superman's presence or the Fantastic Four's presence is going to change the world. You don't get into that problem with Joker stories because it's about, maybe you do in the sense that, that Killing Joke sense, or it's there in Dark Knight Returns of, eventually somebody's going to kill the other person. But, when you're locked into this death struggle. But with the Joker, because it's about the elaborate scheme in and of itself, it's about the panache, it's about the fun of it. He's almost the ultimate superhero villain for a continuing narrative because, like with somebody else, I mean, you think of Magneto, like how many times can you lose? How many times can you threaten to reverse the Earth's poles and, conquer Manhattan or whatever and lose before you just say, maybe I'm doing something wrong here, With the Joker, he's not doing something wrong. The goal is, the elaborate scheme. The goal is the look on Batman's face when he realizes what's been done to Alfred,
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
it's like you say though, with all those other villains, Magneto. If you were to take like Magneto, Captain Cold, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, there's a sort of a thing at the moment of former villains becoming heroes. You know, they get, I don't want to say redeemed, but they get accepted almost as an anti-hero or as a, you know, almost hero. There's never going to be a chance of that with the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd never see Clayface was up until recently was part of like the Bat family. You know, after everything he's done, the Joker's never going to be jumping the fence to join the Bat side. It's just not going to happen. You know, and that's part of, like you say, for all his versatility, he's always going to be the baddie because that's where the fun is, I suppose, for him.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, you can't imagine the Joker joining the Bat family, or you know, it's Batman and Robin and Nightwing and Joker. You know, yeah, it's not going to happen. And I think that you know, I mean, I like that. I like that villains get redeemed, and good and evil aren't you know, just sort of innate in people. I think that's a kind of redeeming sort of narrative. But, you know, I feel like with Joker, like, you know, is the Joker really evil?
Mm.
Is he really? I mean, he's a bad guy, but he's not doing it to be bad, you know? He's almost removed from the usual, you know, good. He's, in a way, he's the one who's most likely to remain a bad guy forever, but he's not your usual bad guy. I mean, he's not doing it to, you know, take over a city or conquer or anything like that. He's having fun. He's being himself. He's a self-actualized person.
Yeah, that's it. He is. He's fully accepted who he is and what he wants to do, and he's living the dream. Because that's one of those things that, you know, you hear them say. You mentioned about Marvel villains and stuff for the films. They have a bit of a problem in many ways because they never want to take them to their full villainous potential because it could be too far. But yeah, they've always got to be, you know, as if they could be slightly redeemable because they want you to sympathise with the villain, or, you know, give them a cause that they could just be right. You know, that sort of, you know, Magneto is a villain because he takes a different political stance on the treatment of mutants, or, you know, in Civil War, Baron Zemo was actually taking revenge because his entire country had been flattened by a robot created by Tony Stark. You accept those as justifications. But like I say, the Joker just does it because he woke up this morning and thought, I want to do this thing where I'm going to float zeppelins across the city and dump, you know, poison gas on it. It's just whatever's in his head.
Well, and that's one thing that I really like about the Ledger performance. You know, it's Ledger hanging upside down saying, we can do this forever. There's no end game in sight. You know, it's that idea of, while, you know, obviously it's portrayed in a kind of anarchistic way, of some people just like to see the world burn. There's no agenda here. And that might be something that gets a little more right than the Nicholson, where, you know, he's having fun, but he's still a gangster. He still wants to sort of take over the town in some way.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Actually, yeah, in that performance, because in the film, I like the fact that there is like almost like a hard left turn. You know, with the Ledger Joker, that, you know, he's brought in to do a purpose where he says, well, you just kill the Bat. You know, if you can't do it, I'll do it. But then when he sort of meets him, he's like, no, there's so much fun to be had here. I'm not going to be killing anybody right now.
Yeah, quite. I mean, he ends that film as a very different character than he starts with, that he starts being. And you know, it's that ending character who's enjoying the chase, who I most identify with, and who stays with me as the Joker.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's almost like an origin story for the true Joker. In actual fact, that the one that would then come out in Gotham City and do all the crazy schemes and that sort of thing. I mean, he acts as the pivot in that film of, the question is about being a hero or a villain, Batman v Two-Face towards the end, and the Joker's almost removed because he's not a hero or a villain. He is just there to cause chaos.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, in reading about the Joker before this, yeah, I was reminded of, they did, I guess it was in the 70s when the Joker was the first villain to ever have his own comic series. And, they weren't great comics, and it was up against the problem of, the comics code and you've got a villain starring it, so he mostly is fighting other villains, rather than really, following him and identifying with him. But I think that's kind of telling in terms of the Joker's legacy and how much we like the Joker, that and maybe even that the Joker isn't a conventional villain after all.
Yeah, I do like that because there was there's a graphic novel I think it's just called The Joker. I think by Brian Azzarello, which is it literally just follows the Joker for a period of a couple of days. And I don't really think you could do that with any other villain and get away with it as like an original, say a graphic novel standing on its own.
Yeah, and I think maybe those villains who have an agenda, it's also easier to realize that there must come some point at which, if you're a Magneto or a Doctor Doom or something, there must come some point at which you realize what I'm doing is terrible. I have a good agenda, but I'm kind of committing genocide here.
Yeah.
I've crossed some kind of line. I mean, I think that's even true with like Ra's al Ghul, with the environmental terrorism. I mean, there has to come some point at which you say, well, the ends don't justify the means anymore, and that's not a problem in Joker stories because he's enjoying it.
Mm.
The goal is to inflict psychological harm on Batman and, you know, um, have this elaborate plan and do it with panache. So I don't kind of run to the same sort of pullback that I get from some of those other stories of, why are you doing this again?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's always hard to sort of find, like you say, the justification for the actions that take place. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think the Joker is unique in, I don't even think they've tried to imitate him in any real sense. Um, you don't get many other villains that would actually you could put in that same like I say, that Venn diagram. Really, the Joker's very much on his own.
yeah, I think so. And I think that's something that, I mean, I might like seeing now that something like, the Marvel movies are as advanced as they are. It might be interesting to kind of break up the form and introduce somebody who, you know, kind of grew up in a world with lots of superheroes and the trope of the villains being commonplace, and thought, you know, I saw them on TV. That looks fun. That's what I want to do. How can I do that and have fun with this? I could see that working, but it's not an aspect of the Joker that's often been duplicated.
Mm. It'd be quite hard to write though. You'd need a good story to back it up to explore that point. That the point is to have fun rather than the point being an objective. I think too many people would read it hoping for like a solid conclusion or a conclusive payoff.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Yeah, and we make these superhero stories like most fiction into a kind of like zero-sum game, right? Where there's a winner and there's a loser, and and the Joker seems outside of that. It's not a zero-sum game. I mean, Batman can win, and it was still amazing, and the Joker's quite happy. Like you said, to sort of let Batman go in Mad Love.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I want to see him against a different, superhero. Maybe that's what. If you were to do him against Flash or Green Arrow, and for the end to simply be that it gets to the end and the Joker's like, no, this isn't actually as fun as Gotham. So yeah, this plan's off, and I'm going home.
Yeah, I can see that.
That level of confusion on the hero's face of like, "No, I've come to stop you," and he's like, "Oh no, don't worry about that. It's over. This wasn't working for me."
Yeah, I quite like that idea, I like that sort of anticlimax.
I think there'd be too many complaints about that though. From the comic community would be an uproar if that was the case.
Right. Yeah, that might be. But I guess the WB can do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, they keep. They're currently throwing out the idea of an origin story for the Joker, produced by Martin Scorsese. I forget who's the director, with Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be outside of the DC extended universe. But yet, I think with Affleck still.
Yeah, it seems really unclear how they're going to do it. I don't know. But I don't know how I feel about that, because it's that thing again, much like we discussed when we talked about the Killing Joke, of providing the Joker with what they want to consider almost like a definitive origin story, when I don't think that firstly it's not needed, but I also think it shouldn't happen, because otherwise you're sort of trying to give him an agenda. You try and give him a history which informs it, but you don't need that for the character to work.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's unnecessary, and I think the reason why it's unnecessary is all the things that we've just said, that the Joker likes the chase. I mean, the Joker, it's about that conflict with Batman. Why he's doing it, I mean, is almost inconsequential. Where he comes from is we don't need, and certainly Hollywood's gone too far in terms of thinking, everything's got to be a year one story. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Joker's versatile enough that if that movie's made, I'm likely to say, well, that is a take on the Joker. That's, that might be, seeing, the Joker, as Taxi Driver or something. Well, that was a thing. And if it doesn't work for me, it won't bother me. I mean, I think I didn't like, especially Leto in Suicide Squad, but and I don't like personally the sort of, because I like the dapper aspect of the Joker. So, for me, the kind of like tattooed out, teeth as spikes kind of, it's anesthetic. I mean, it works for what it is, I guess, but it's not what I envision. But it doesn't take away from what I envision. And I think that because the Joker is so versatile, that's okay. It doesn't anger me or upset me. So, if that movie gets made and I think, well, there are a couple of things I like in it, but that's about it, I won't throw out all my Joker comics or something,
Yeah, that's true craziness. No, I know what you mean. It's interesting, and I like the idea of, the possibility of a Goodfellas level of film quality go into a Joker story, which is incredible. But I think that's a sort of a hot, wait and see how that one pans out.
Well, and they're also operating in the shadow of Heath Ledger. I mean, and Leto, didn't establish himself. I mean, obviously he's kind of a secondary character in that movie, but I mean, it's funny to me that Nicholson's performance was seen as so iconic, and then Ledger came along, and now everybody's kind of in the shadow of Heath Ledger, and of course he died, and it was that performance was so mythologized that um, I think there's some kind of tension of, well, what do we do that could possibly escape the shadow.
Well, I think that the thing you've talked about before, that I think it was too soon. I mean, like you say, when you look at the on-screen performances of the Joker, you sort of Cesar Romero's Joker in '66 is spot on for what that show was and for what the '60s were. The fact he would go surfing in his dapper suit and a pair of Bermuda shorts is perfect.
Yeah.
And then you have the yuppie gangster sort of Goodfellas sort of kind of Nicholson Joker is perfect for the late '80s. It's again spot on for the era, and then for Ledger's Joker to be that post 9/11 anarchist, rile against authority kind of figure, is spot on for the era. It's a representation of the times. Not enough has changed for us to accept a new Joker, or Leto's Joker was possibly too, it felt too commercial, but it didn't seem authentic for what what we need right now.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it didn't seem to. I mean, what did it have to say? I mean, we can argue endlessly over those other depictions, but they seem to not only represent that era, but also have some kind of commentary on it, push that idea further. What does Leto's Joker embody? And I don't mean to, I feel guilty even saying this because I know that he took that role seriously, and I mean, I feel bad, I feel bad saying this, but
I doubt he's going to hear it. I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, well, I mean, presumably we're all adults, and you can criticize something without, making a creator cry or something. But yeah, I agree with you, and more time does help that. I can't wait to see what the next sort of definitive Joker is.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think and a Joaquin Phoenix Joker could be amazing. It could be really interesting. He's a great character actor. So it's enough time could pass that we actually, like you say, we can find something that is a comment on our times. It's not the villain you deserve. It's the villain you need.
Yeah, quite. And I felt that way with Nicholson and certainly with Ledger. That boy, it's astounding how much Ledger's performance has been inscribed in the cultural mainstream. Certainly a kind of iconic role, and it's hard to imagine who's going to come along and give the 2010s or 2020s version of that. But I think you're right that it should be updated. It should be something that seems to represent the era and not just be another take.
Okay, on all that, I think it's been a fantastic conversation. It shows how fascinating the character is. The Joker can be so versatile and talked about in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm so glad we had this conversation, Julian. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Scott. I always enjoy it. We're kindred spirits.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm doing some big stuff on Superman in a couple of months, so I'd love to have you on to talk about Superman and some bits and pieces there, if possible.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay. Just to give you the Kickstarter, is that still going?
Yeah, it's we've got just over a week left. on the Synthetics #1, crazy robot stories, robots on Mars having a revolution, and there are a few print copies left on the Kickstarter. So, and we always have a whole line of comics over at on Comixology if you look for Martian Lit.
Excellent. We'll try them out. I shall put a link to them on the show notes as well.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, and it's been a joy as always. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It has been a great conversation, and we'll catch up again soon.
All right, I look forward to it.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you, Jude. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Our thoughts on the Joker. And if you've got any thoughts or you want to contribute to this conversation, please get in contact. You can find me on Twitter at 20th Century Geek, or email me at 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook, on Tumblr, on Instagram, all under 20th Century Geek. Or in fact, get in contact for any reason. It's all good. I enjoy talking to all of you. And of course, the biggie, the thing that helps us keep the lights on. We have got a Patreon page. Please go on, find our Patreon page, donate anything you can, become a subscriber. It all helps. And I'm going to go back old school. Please subscribe on iTunes, leave a 5-star review. All these things help. If you like 20th Century Geek, show the love. Okay, it's all appreciated. Now next month, Mike and I are going to step back in the squared circle. We're going to head back in time. You're going to get some bad Hulk Hogan impressions, some terrible Randy Savage impressions. That's right, we are going to be doing 80s wrestling. So, if that rocks your wheelhouse, please join us next month and we will be going back into the squared circle. But for now, thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.